Welcome back to Impact Show. So the reason why I created this show is to really exploit some of my great friends in my network. The one thing that all my friends have in common is they have to put up with me asking them to be on my show. I knew Bill would be okay with it. Really excited about this. And you know, the idea around impact is really about the type of impact that you're making on the world, not just in business, but with your life and your legacy and the things that you're doing. There's a very special place that we're standing in right now, which is Bill Lyon's car museum at his residence. Bill, tell our group a little bit about you and your background in a few minutes. Just tell us where you grew up and kind of how you got into the work that you do.
Well, I was born in Newport Beach. Was there a couple years, and then my dad, who had been in home building since the 50s, became chief of the Air Force Reserve. We moved back to Virginia for 4 years, came back again, finished up school in Newport, and my parents built this house, which was completed about 1988 in Coto de Caza. I went to Santa Margarita High School out here, went to college, came back, and even though I'd been working summers for my father's company since I was about 11, I started full-time after college and spent about 22 years in the company, which was William Lyon Homes for the majority of that time, and then recently combined that with Taylor Morrison Homes, and I serve as a board member there. And this is part of my parents' home. My dad was a car nut, classic car nut specifically, and I kind of got the bug from him. Have different favorites maybe than he did, but it was an interest we both shared, and we had a lot of fun with it together.
Awesome. I mean, there's so much there, Bill. The legacy that the Lyon family has created, what you're taking into the next generation. Tell us a little bit about this property. So you say Coto de Caza. How much property are we talking about here? Tell us about the land that we're on.
So when my parents bought this was kind of the end of Coto. It was the site of the '84 equestrian, I think, Olympic events. It was really hard to get out here. You had to go through Santiago Canyon, and then over time, as Santa Margarita got developed, they actually built out the rest of Coto, and now we're kind of in the middle of it. But it's a 135-acre property. With orange groves on it, and very colonial in style. My parents had a colonial house when they were back in Virginia, and they wanted to bring that back with them, and so that's kind of the story. Super
awesome. And last time I checked, I had a 3-car garage. Tell us a little bit about this awesome garage, and let's walk and talk a little bit as we dive into this spectacular venue.
So the initial building that was built with the house is kind of what we're standing in, which is 14,000 feet, including storage, and there's 3 service bays in the back and a lift and the whole thing. Some years later, we added on another 10,000 square feet, not necessarily to house more cars, but just to spread everything out and kind of make the experience a little more enjoyable. It was a great thing, so we've now kind of got a little bit of a mixture in this room, and then the back is kind of you know, some of my dad's favorites, which were, you know, Duesenberg and Mercedes and some other special cars, Auburns, Cords.
Awesome. And today is a very special day because together in partnership with the IEC, we're putting on an event for Orange County United Way and the great work that they do with the Women's Philanthropy Fund. So we are the Men of Breakfast, and we're putting this group together of about 60 executives, CEOs within Orange County, car nuts. I can't wait. In fact, I want to film the look on their faces as they come rolling through here. A lot of people hear about this place, but they never get to step foot. So thank you for kicking off the inaugural Cars and Garages of Orange County. This is going to be something that we do quarterly in honor of the great work of Orange County United Way. I mean, we're battling homelessness, crime, financial literacy, all sorts of different issues, housing, and those are the kind of things that happen by building a great community. So thank you for loaning your incredible car museum to us for this spectacular day. Tell us a little bit about your favorites and some of the most historic vehicles that are here. We're going to be playing B-roll as you go through, so maybe as you look around, tell us about some of the vehicles that are in here, and maybe like 3 or 4 of them that are very special to you.
I probably would start with my dad's favorite, which is just in the other room here, but that's a 1929 Duesenberg. And it was, if you ask my dad what was his favorite car, it was always that car. And that was for a couple different reasons. He'd always wanted a Duesenberg. He'd gotten close a few times and never bought one. And then my mother surprised him on his 60th birthday. They had a big surprise party at the Briggs-Cunningham Museum, which used to be in Tustin in kind of an industrial building. And at the end of the party, there was several hundred people there. This Briggs drove this car out, and my dad thought it was part of their thing and didn't really get it, that it was his. And then the bigger thing he didn't really get for a couple weeks is it's the first J model Duesenberg. And the J's were what made Duesenberg famous. They were the ultimate, you know, luxury performance American car, supercar really, that was probably ever built. And they made less than 500, and that was the first chassis. Or the first engine, I guess. So Duesenbergs are a little odd. They're all known by their engine number, not their VIN number or chassis number. It's a little odd. So J101 is the first J model, which was my dad's favorite, and I was one of my favorites. He taught me how to drive, how to double clutch on that car driving up and down Coto de Caza driveway when I was about 14, and I thought he'd lost his mind because I was like, I don't think I should drive this. He's like, no, it'll be fine. So
that's a cool one. Any other standouts?
Yeah, the Packard behind us here, this blue Packard, that's a 34 LeBaron. It's one of 4 bodies. So LeBaron used to be a coach builder, not just a Chrysler model. So they built bodies for Duesenberg, Packard, all kinds of different makes. Actually, the J101 Duesenberg is also a LeBaron body. But this is pretty unique in that there were only 4 of them made. It's kind of, 34 was kind of the pinnacle of Packard design, both mechanically and aesthetically, and it's a swept back boat tail speedster, very sporty. It's won its class at Pebble Beach when it was freshly restored, and then is placed as when it went back actually many years later. My dad sold the car at one point and bought it back again, and he was super excited to buy it back, and that came out of Harrah's, I believe, originally. Okay. So
awesome.
Some big history there as well.
Anything back in this showroom? Why don't we start walking that way and kind of take a look at that?
So to give you sort of a different flavor, so this Alfa here, which is super tiny in size, actually has a big history behind it. So this is a 65 Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ2, and the TZ is Tubularo Zagata, so it's a Zagata designed body. They built about 100 aluminum TZs, and then as they got to kind of the end of their run and they were becoming a little less competitive in racing, they looked at the rules and figured out, okay, they could mess with the bodywork. So they actually rebodied, or didn't rebody, but bodied a new run of cars, and there was only, I think, 11 of these built. And this was one of the factory team cars, so it ran at Le Mans, it ran at Monza, it ran at Sebring, all the big races, and then the livery it has here is from the Targa Florio, so which it had a great performance there. And we showed this at Pebble Beach. It was a lot of fun, kind of different for us, given that we're normally doing heavy classic stuff, but had a great time showing it, cramming my dad in the passenger seat for the tour. Right. It's the loudest car I've ever driven. The exhaust is right under the driver's window, and it's a race car, so it's a straight exhaust. If you are a car simulation nut, or your kids are, so the award it won that year, so that was 2009, I'm pretty sure, was the Gran Turismo Award. So awesome. The makers of the Gran Turismo video game basically selected the car, and the prize was they came out with a team from Japan and scanned the car into the game. So if you get enough points, you can buy the car in the game, and it's kind of interesting.
There you are, 1965 Alfa Romeo. So what else is going on in here? This is great. It keeps going.
So this is mostly Duesenbergs and Mercedes. This is a 35 Duesenberg SJ. The SJ designates a supercharger. There was only about 35 originally supercharged cars. I think we've got 3 of them here. This one was a one-off, so back in this period, if you had enough money, you could, not just get, a super high-end car like a Duesenberg, you could get one that was just your design only.
Awesome.
And so this was built for a Maharaja of Indore, India, and bodied in London, and basically was the ultimate spec. There weren't a whole lot of options from the factory, but it's a long wheelbase versus a short wheelbase supercharged car, and a speedster, which there's very few speedsters, which is basically a two-door roadster with no roll-up windows. Oddly enough, this car has some Orange County history in that the Maharaja had a house in the Flower Streets in Santa Ana and was married to an American actress for a time, and so I'm not sure it actually made it to India, but it has these interesting marker lights on the fenders, which apparently were his idea to solve a problem where, if his car was driving around his kingdom, people would bow to the car, even if he wasn't in it, and he didn't like that. So the lights were to indicate if he was in the car, or if his wife was in the car, or if they were both in the car.
Oh, very cool.
So you knew what was going on. The base Duesenberg was 265 horsepower. That supercharger got you up to 320 horsepower. So these cars were capable of well over 100 miles an hour. Didn't stop as well as they went, but some pretty cool racy things. All the supercharged cars have an exhaust cutout, basically, so you can bypass the muffler and have a straight exhaust. So it's kind of a
awesome
racy hot rod thing to be able to do.
Great. Pretty innovative for the time.
Oh, yeah.
Anything else in a closing vehicle?
I could go on.
I know.
These. There's some interesting history. I mean, that's one of the things that always interests me about the cars, and was really my dad's, cars that have a story. This is a nice Sata Fraschini, so an Italian car, kind of like Alfa Romeo, I think actually considered a step up in the day. Rudolph Valentino had a nice Sata Fraschini. This is one of two bodies in this style by a coach builder named Castagna. This car won Pebble Beach, unfortunately before we owned it. We've never actually won Pebble Beach. So a car that has two windshields like this and a convertible with no roll-up windows is generally called a dual cowl Phaeton. Normally they would be a four-door as a Phaeton, but this is a two-door with a back seat.
And the dual windshield, I mean, what's going on back there? Is that for a VIP, a dignitary, or is that just how it was for wind blockage?
Just so you don't get your hair messed up, I
Got
guess,
it,
basically.
okay.
And you can see we have some other cars that have different wind screens, but if you actually have kind of the fold-up kind of hard cowl, that makes it a dual cowl.
Right.
On the Mercedes side of the equation, you asked for a couple, I'm going to give you a bunch here, but this is a 37 540K Special Roadster Mercedes. This is kind of considered the pinnacle of Mercedes design, and this was their in-house coach-built car. There weren't a ton of these built. There were some different options, different fenders you could have on the front, low doors versus the high doors this car has. This car has an uncovered spare in the back. You could have a cover for the spare, but they're just, one of those cars that looks like they're going 100 miles an hour sitting still. And they are supercharged, 5.4 liter engine, only produce 180 horsepower though, compared to a Duesenberg from almost a decade earlier. So really interesting kind of the differences in, American muscle versus the European approach. Then if you kind of look the next car over, so that was a 540K. This is a 770K, so 7.7 liter straight 8, supercharged with the K for compressor, just like they still do it. This was a one-off body ordered by the Prince of Iran, who would become the Shah of Iran. Ordered before the war, not completed until during the war, and Iran was on the Allies' side, so not delivered at all. Wow. Sat at the factory, was captured by Russian troops and put on a rail car back to Russia, and the factory thought it was destroyed and never seen again until late 1980s. A guy bought it and got it out of Russia into Canada, and then my father restored it. Just, the overkill of German engineering, it's, I think, got 3 different horns, 2 complete ignition systems, custom tool little trays in here, everything with its own little spot. And you can see all the the engine turning on all this aluminum and magnesium is really beautiful. Just, you know, the 770 class was supposed to compete with Rolls-Royce as a car for heads of state and dignitaries. And then, of course, you go a little bit further in years and you get into what Mercedes was doing during the war, which this is 39, this is 41. So this is an Offener touring wagon, which you've probably seen in newsreels because the Nazis were using these. This is based on the same car, but this is much more military in application, not as much ornamentation, and actually completely bulletproof. Glass, doors, floor, and there's actually even a armor plate that can be cranked up behind the back seat. This car was given to the Prime Minister of Finland by Adolf Hitler, who rode in it, I believe, about 3 times, and spent the rest of the war in Finland. I've been trying to figure out the whole Finnish connection with World War II because it is a little interesting. They were flying our planes, fighting the Russians, also flying our planes, except they had big swastikas on our planes because they were allied with Germany, and then I guess at a certain point in World War II they flipped and fought against Germany. But it's a massive car. We've had it for, gosh, I don't know, 35 years or something. But you can get a sense for the armor just with the thickness of the windows. And so really interesting piece of history. And it toured the US at one point to help sell war bonds. And they, you know, basically tried to pass it off as Hitler's personal car and put, you know, German flags all over it and the whole thing. And the real history was actually a little more interesting in the sort of interplay and politics between the two countries. And this won its class at Pebble Beach. It's hard to decipher, but it is, the fenders are black and the body of the car is a dark, dark, dark blue, which doesn't really pop until you get it in the sun. But pretty amazing piece of engineering and history as well.
So Bill, I mean, it begs the question here, to keep these cars in this condition for so many generations, are you taking these out? I mean, they have to exercise their legs, right? Can you talk to us about that process?
Yeah, every car gets driven at least twice a year, a few miles, and they, you know, do a full service on it at least once a year. Usually find something that's gone kaput and fix it and keep it going.
So as we wrap up our interview, Bill, you know, kind of tell us, because, you know, we have thousands of people that watch our show, and people are aficionados, they're asset collectors. You know, without asking you how much all this is worth, how does a value of an asset like this go up? Is it how clean the car is, how many miles are on it? Is it its historic nature? What are the details that go into this asset class?
So cars, I think, and it's evolved over time. I think there was like in the 80s, there was a lot of value placed on, you know, perfection and the level of restoration of the cars. And obviously we have some that are, you know, basically perfect. But nowadays I'd say, you know, if a car is a nice original, that actually has a higher value. And so you'll see some crazy prices paid for things that look a little beat just because it's original. It's only original once. It's kind of the same way I think you know, antique furniture kind of went through that cycle as well, where now there just aren't that many originals anymore. And then you really get down to, you know, there's kind of a couple different elements, but the rarity of the car, how many were made, you know, was it a great car to begin with? I think there's some that have become collectible because they were financially not commercially successful and they didn't make very many, but there's sort of the rarity factor. So, you know, when it comes to like the Duesenbergs or the Mercedes, you know, they made a lot of Mercedes, but how many of that body did they make? And, you know, the Duesenbergs, we have some that, you know, they were bodies you could order of a catalog, so there might be 40 or 50 of those, or 3, or just 1. And then the last thing is kind of what you hear them talk about, provenance, is, you know, the story of the car and being able to trace it from the beginning to now, and, you know, the story, what happened, where was it, you know, who was associated with it, and sometimes that's, you know, the best part is kind of the stories.
So it's all about that history, that birth certificate of your vehicle, and just keep track of that like a log, like Bill's saying, because that'll add to the asset value of your car. I have one exotic car. It's my 2007 Aston Martin. I'm very proud of. I worked hard for it, and I take very good care of it. Similar in nature, I know its history, I know its birth, I know its progression, and it's exciting, and hopefully one day I can pass it along to my family. Bill, you also have a collection of aircraft. Can you tell us, just in closing, a little bit about Lyon Air Museum?
Sure, yeah. Lyon Air Museum is at John Wayne Airport. My father had started collecting 20 years or so, mostly aircraft that he'd flown. I think he flew basically everything except the one plane we have there, the sort of a Vietnam era plane that our president of the museum, he actually restored that plane and he flies it. We have everything from, you know, a Stearman, which I think is a 42 or 43, which is kind of a canvas wing biplane, you know, basically where you'd start training as a Air Force or Navy cadet, all the way to a B-17 Flying Fortress, which, you know, was a heavy bomber during the European side of the World War II conflicts. You've got some vehicles down there as well, and a lot of memorabilia. We have a great team of volunteer docents. Many of them are vets who just love talking to people about everything down there. We try to do some intermixing of the cars and the planes. We've been hosting a few car clubs throughout the year who generally do a little event there, and then generally in the summers, because it's warmer, we don't have air conditioning, we don't do as many events during the summer, so we try to do private events like weddings, that kind of stuff. So we usually do a car display because we're not moving stuff in and out quite as much.
Super cool, and we've shared that information in case you want to go. It's an awesome place. I've taken my children, their schools, it's just a great place. In closing, when you open Lyon Air Museum, I'll never forget, I did approach you 10 years ago. I said, hey, can we bring Elon Musk to the Air Museum? You said, sure. And your father, who was a great mentor to me as well, just opened the doors. I'll never forget that moment where Elon Musk came to Orange County right at the opening of Lyon Air Museum. It was a very special day. We were there with a lot of tech and other business leaders, and you've always been so generous to me over the years and to our whole community, and that's leadership. It's all about action and taking initiative like that. I know Elon's going to watch this because I'm going to send it to him, but imagine looking at the generations. It's all about transportation. We as human beings, we're social creatures, but we also need to go places, right? So over generations, moving has always taken a forefront. Any closing thoughts on your thoughts on electric and how the world has moved in this direction, and where your personal interests are around your own cars?
Well, my Tesla's outside, so maybe that tells you something. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to see all the new electrics coming to market now. You know, range doesn't seem to be as big of an issue now with the battery technology where they're getting it. So I think, you know, if they can get the cost down, there's definitely, especially with volatility in oil and everything else going on right now, I mean, it's definitely a big advantage to just be able to park your car in the garage, plug it in, and not worry about it. The only times I do worry about it is when I forget to plug it in. Right. But you know, I love that as a dependable way to get from A to B, but I enjoy the older cars just because they have so much personality, and you know, you may not be going as fast or as comfortable, but there's somehow, I don't know, I've got the sickness, so it's hard to explain.
I know, that's good. I got Tesla too. It's a fantastic thing. And you know, in closing, Bill's created so much impact here in Orange County and Southern California. Another project was Pretend City Children's Museum. In fact, he asked me to join the board when I didn't have kids, probably because he thought I was a kid, and I said, sure. And then I had children, and I realized what an amazing place you created. You and some of the founders, can you just talk in closing? I've said that like 3 times, but these projects just keep coming, right? But this is the last one. Okay. Pretend City Children's Museum. I mean, we took an entire city, really like Orange County and all the main landmarks, and shrunk it 2/3 in size, and there's been hundreds of thousands of people. Your late friend Kobe Bryant helped us open it. Can you tell us a little bit about Pretend City?
Yeah, I think, you know, the mission of the museum is really to help kids build brighter brains. And when we started, it was funny because there wasn't a lot of research on the importance of play in childhood development. Now that's getting a lot more attention. There's a lot more statistical data about it. You know, one of the scary things before COVID, only about half of the kids in Orange County, regardless of socioeconomic status, were ready for kindergarten. Yeah. And can't imagine it's gotten better over COVID. It must be much worse. So it's really to try to find, provide this venue for kids to play in and parents to learn how to interact with their children in the real world to help their brains develop. We're working on kind of the future of that now, which will be in a different location, much bigger, some outdoor activity as well. But it's been a great thing to be involved in, and to know, now that my oldest, who was 5 when we opened, is 17. It's kind of wild, but just trying to helping physically explain to kids how systems work, money system. If you want to buy something, you got to work to get the dollars to go buy it, and food comes from the farm and goes to the store and goes to the goes to the restaurant and then to the house, and all that stuff is on when it's on a kid-sized level, it clicks with them. It's really cool to watch.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for taking us through this breathtaking, jaw-dropping, there aren't enough adjectives to describe this amazing venue, but think back to your legacy and the impact that you're making. It really just comes back to the people in need, right? And we just told a story about different ways that Bill and his family has made an impact on this entire region, their industry, and the world. And these are things that you can do as well, and that's something I want to challenge you with. Think about, what is your propensity? What is your Lyon Air Museum? What sort of thing can you do to give back to the community? And if you're more interested in Orange County United Way, the information is here, or the Internet Marketing Association IEC, and our Men of Breakfast supporting the Women's Philanthropy Fund. All that information is here. We're excited to have our first Garages of Orange County event officially tonight. We're going to welcome about 60 leaders in about 30 minutes. So I do appreciate you for tuning in, and we'll be back at you. And don't forget about Impact 22 happening in Deer Valley at the Montage, October 7th through 9th. I hope you can make it. Take care.